Thank you for joining us today. I'm attorney Gloria Allred, and with me is Lisa Gentile. I will be making a statement. Lisa will then be making a statement, and then we will be happy to take some of your questions. Actually, I will take your questions. Lisa will not be answering any questions today. Today, I'm here with my client, Lisa Gentile, who alleges that she was sexually abused by actor Chris Noth in 2002. Lisa is a singer and a songwriter and a resident of New York State. Even though it is difficult, she is breaking her silence today to share how she alleges that she was sexually victimized by Mr. Noth, because she believes that breaking her silence may help others who have been victimized by powerful men in their lives. Because what Lisa alleges happened to her almost 20 years ago, under the law in New York State, it is too late for her to have access to justice in New York State. In New York, the statute of limitations, which is the arbitrary time period set by law for filing and litigating a lawsuit, has expired. In other words, it's too late for her to file a lawsuit and have a jury hear her testimony under oath against Chris Noth. The courthouse door is slammed shut in her face, denying her an opportunity to seek to assert and vindicate her rights in a court of law because of the statute of limitations. Lisa feels that it's time for the law to change, and that is why she is speaking out today. She understands that many victims of sexual abuse do not come forward until years later for a variety of reasons. In some cases, they think that nobody will believe them or that they will be blamed for what happened to them. In other cases, they may be threatened or feel threatened or believe that they will be retaliated against by the powerful person who has victimized them. The result is that adult survivors of adult sexual abuse in New York are denied access to justice because when they are finally courageous enough to come forward, they are barred by law from pursuing a lawsuit and having a judge and jury decide their case in a New York court of law. It is long overdue for the law to change. In New York now, there's an important bill which has been introduced and which has been passed by the New York State Senate called the Adult Survivors Act, also known as ASA. This bill would create a one-year look-back window for adult survivors of adult sexual abuse to hold those who have sexually victimized them accountable. Victims would be able to file lawsuits, even if it would otherwise be too late under existing law for them to seek justice. This bill would be similar to the law which was passed in New York, which provided a one-year look-back window for adult victims of child sexual abuse. This week, 3 stars of Sex and the City spoke out in support of the women who have made allegations against Chris Noth. Sarah Jessica Parker, Cynthia Nixon, and Kristen Davis said in a statement, quote, "We are deeply saddened to hear the allegations against Chris Noth. We support the women who have come forward and shared their painful experiences. We know it must be very difficult, a difficult thing for them to do, and we commend them for it," end quote. Lisa and I appreciate their words of support for the previous accusers of Chris Noth. And now we urge Sarah, Cynthia, and Kristen to take action to speak out in support of the Adult Survivors Act, as Lisa and I are doing today. Their endorsement of this act will be important to its passage when the New York Legislature begins its session next month. We also call on the first woman governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, to include the passage of the ASA in her State of the State address in the Assembly chamber when she delivers her remarks in less than 2 weeks on January 5th, 2022. At that time, She will explain her policy agenda for New York, and Lisa and I respectfully urge her to include the Adult Survivors Act as an important part of her policy agenda for her administration, so that those who allege that they are victims of sexual predators are afforded their day in court, rather than being denied it by the statute of limitations. We urge Sarah Jessica Parker, Cynthia Nixon, Kristen Davis, and millions of victims and those who care about victims' rights to join us in contacting Governor Hochul to urge her to include the Adult Survivors Act in her policy agenda in her speech on January 5th. We also urge the stars of Sex and the City to state that they would be willing to testify in support of this bill if the New York State Assembly holds a hearing and allows testimony. Lisa and I would also agree to testify if the Assembly permits our testimony. Finally, we also urge Chris Noth to speak out in support of the New York Adult Survivors Act. He has asserted in a statement that everything he did with those who have accused him was consensual. If that is true, then he should support the ASA so that the accuser's allegations can be resolved in a court of law rather than in a court of public opinion. I am honored to support Lisa Gentile in her courageous effort to advocate for change for those who have been victimized. We urge all those who are victims and those who care about victims to join us in our campaign to change the law. All we want for Christmas is access to justice and the passage of the Adult Survivors Act next year. If and when it becomes law, those who were victimized in New York will have the right and the opportunity to finally hold those who have victimized them accountable in a court of law. Thank you. And now it is my pleasure to present Lisa Gentile.
Thank you, Gloria. I first met Chris Noth when I began frequenting Don Marino restaurant in New York City in 1998. He was a regular there and good friends with the owner, Pasquale Marino. I would often see Chris dining and hanging out there when I would visit Don Marino with my family and my friends. Eventually, Chris and I started conversing and we became acquaintances. We would talk mostly about music and show business in the neighborhood. Then on a Saturday night in early 2002, we were all hanging out at Don Marino. Around midnight, I was getting ready to leave. Chris offered me a ride home, and I said, okay. When we arrived at my apartment, he asked if he could come up. I told him I had nothing to offer him to drink, and he said that's okay. He just wanted to see where I lived. He came upstairs, we entered, and we went into the kitchen. He wanted to see the rest of the apartment, but I didn't show him because my roommates were sleeping. He used the restroom, and I found some old box wine and poured him a glass. He started kissing me almost right away. Then he leaned against the kitchen countertop and forcibly pulled me against him. He was slobbering all over me. I quickly became uncomfortable. Then he became more aggressive and put both hands on my breasts and began squeezing them very hard over my shirt. He quickly went under my shirt and began squeezing them even harder over my bra with his fingers grabbing the exposed skin not covered by my bra. Then he pushed my bra up with both of his hands. I grabbed his hands with my hands and tried to stop him. I kept pushing his hands down while he was pushing mine up. I was trying to get him to stop. Then he forced my hands to pull up his shirt, exposing his belly. And then even harder, he pushed my hands down toward his penis. I finally managed to push him away and get out of his grasp and yelled, "No, I don't want this." He became extremely angry and started screaming and calling me a tease and a bitch. He stormed out of my apartment. After he left, I woke up my roommate and best friend and I told her what had happened. She clearly remembers this. The next morning, he called me on my roommate's phone, her landline, that was not in my name. He warned me that if I ever told a soul about what happened the night before, that he would ruin my career, that I would never sing again, and that he would blacklist me in the business. He hung up on me, and I immediately called my mother and father, crying. I was afraid to come forward because Mr. Noth's power and his threats to ruin my career. I'm speaking out now in support of the other 4 women who have courageously come forward before me. I feel that we should have our day in court to seek to hold Mr. Noth accountable for what he did. I'm also speaking out to ensure the rights of my nieces, my goddaughter, and future victims of sexual harassment and assault. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. If you are a reporter and you have a question, feel free to just hit the Q&A button and type in your question, and I will seek to answer it. While you're doing that, also, please know that within an hour or so after we conclude this press conference, if you would like a copy of our statements, I would be happy to send you our statements. And also, we will be happy to send you a recording if you are not able to record on this Zoom. All right, so we will take the first question, which is from Jackie Sallow of the New York Post. And she would like to know how to spell Lisa's last name. And it's G as in Gloria, E-N-T as in Tom, I-L-E. So that's G-E-N-T-I-L-E. The next question is, did she see Mr. Noth again at the restaurant? I think she is not going to be answering that question right now. And also we also have Molly asking when was the last time that Lisa saw Mr. Noth, and that I'll just say it was a long time ago. If there are any other questions, feel free to ask them now. And we'll do our best to answer them. All right, I see no open questions, so I will give just another moment for anyone to type in a question. Okay, I do have a question from Jen Hager from US Weekly. Actually, 2 questions. Her first question is, if And Just Like That is renewed for a second season, do I think that there is a responsibility to include storyline of sexual assault, since this current version does include current issues, including binary roles? Well, this is a very good question, but I'm going to decline to answer it simply because what we think is most important is that the energy of the stars of And Just Like That should be focused on assisting us and others to get the Adult Survivors Act signed into law, passed by the legislature, the assembly in New York, signed by the governor, passed into law, and that would be what I think would be most important. If they want to include a storyline about the stars going to the New York legislature to lobby for that, to testify for that, and speaking out and asking the governor of New York to do that, I think that would be a wonderful storyline, because it would also help to inform and inspire others to get involved so that this bill becomes law in the same way that it became law and gave access to justice to adult victims of child sexual abuse. I would love to see, and just like that, advocate or have a storyline about how an important bill for victims becomes law. So thank you very much for that question, Jen. A question from Nardine, who says, Lisa said 4 victims. Who are you counting as the 4 if Lisa is the 5th? I'm under the impression that there were 4 that spoke out, and I think that's Lisa's impression as well. So we're just talking, we haven't spoken to any of the others, 3 or 4 who came forward to the press or to the public. So we prefer not to name those, and I would just respectfully suggest that you could check with news reports. Jen had a second question, which I now see, and her second question is, could we explain why it's important for victims to seek justice in civil courts? That's a very good question as well. The statute of limitations has also expired for Lisa to even have her allegations prosecuted if prosecutors felt that there was sufficient evidence to prosecute based on her allegations and any evidence that she would offer in support of that. Civil justice is a way that victims can seek justice, and many victims don't know anything about that because you rarely will see anything like that or about that on television. Most often what we're seeing is criminal cases. And the answer is because in a civil case, it is the victim's case, the plaintiff's case, who files it, and she is no longer on the defensive as person being attacked. It's her case, and she can seek accountability in a court of law on that. She can seek justice as long as she is within the time period to file that case. And I have found, as a person who has, filed civil cases and litigated those cases for almost 47 years now, that it is very empowering for victims and survivors to have the opportunity to file a civil lawsuit. It's a lower burden of proof that is required in order to prove a case. The victim only needs to prove her case by a preponderance of the evidence, not by the higher burden of proof, which is beyond a reasonable doubt that is required in a criminal case. Much lower burden of evidence is necessary to prove a case in a civil court. So I've found it very empowering and a way to seek accountability and justice. Thank you for that question, Jen. And it's also, of course, an opportunity to put the accused under oath, although there are some accused who may not be under oath because they may assert their Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. But that really depends on the facts and whether a court decides that there is sufficient evidence for them to assert the privilege and decline to testify. Edward Helmore is asking, has Lisa been in touch with Noth's other accusers or the cast of the show? And the answer is no and no. She has not been in touch with other accusers, and she has not been in touch with the cast of And Just Like That. Julius Young from Fox News Digital asks, did Lisa have any other interaction with Noth after the alleged incident in question? If so, what was his demeanor like? I I'm sorry, but we're going to decline to answer that question at this time. I will say that no interaction recently. The next question from Jimmy McCloskey is, did Lisa watch And Just Like That? Does she find it upsetting to see photos of videos of Noth in the wake of the alleged attack? I will just say, and I don't know if she's watched And Just Like That, but I do know that she did find it upsetting to see him in the news and recently and be reminded of what she alleges happened to her. Definitely it was triggering for Lisa. KNX Craig, if civil litigation laws change in New York to allow a civil case in this matter, will I pursue one against Noth? Well, I am a New York licensed attorney. I could file and have filed lawsuits in New York, some of which are still being litigated. But that would be a decision that would need to be made by Lisa and me if, as and when the law is passed. What is most important about the law is it gives victims and survivors the opportunity to make that decision in conjunction with their lawyer. So it's not a decision which we will be making now, but she would like to have the opportunity to make that decision and have access to justice if she so chooses. The next question from Nikki is, did he drive her home or get a cab for the two of them? And the answer is he drove. Jen has another question. Again, if you have a question, feel free to type in after you hit Q&A. Jen Hager has another question, which is, have I been approached by other alleged victims?
Excuse me.
Well, I will just say that I have been contacted by others, and I will just leave it at that at this time. Of course, I'm always happy to respond to persons who allege they are victims of anyone and, help them to know what their options are, if any, and their rights and responsibilities and the benefits and risks of any option they may wish to choose. The next question is from Edward, which is, how has this alleged assault affected Lisa's life and career? I will just say it's had a very serious emotional impact on her, and she is a very talented singer and songwriter, and I really don't want to comment on what impact that has had on her career at this time. Emily Sugarman is asking for the spelling of the restaurant where they met, and that's Damarino, and that is in New York. And I do understand from what I've read in the news that there is another accuser who also alleged that she was victimized in New York. Damarino, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, is capital D-A, capital M-A-R-I-N-O. And she's nodding that that's correct spelling. Maria Puente from USA Today asks, if the ASA, Adult Survivors Act in New York, is passed, will it be a one-year look-back law as with the child version of this in New York. And she's also indicating that she believes that that law has already expired. And the answer is yes, unless, of course, it is modified by the New York Legislature, in other words, changed in any way. But what we're saying, it could be the same as the one-year look-back law for adult survivors of child sexual abuse. And yes, Maria, you are correct that law has now expired. It was a one-year window originally, but that 1 year was extended due to COVID. But even with the extension, it has now expired, sadly, because I would love it if it had more than a 1 year window, but we are very happy that it at least had a 1 year window and then was extended. So now it's time to pass the adult survivors of adult abuse, sexual abuse in New York. I am also being asked by Tim from NBC News if for permission to use a screen grab of this Zoom for an illustration of the NBC News story. Thank you for asking permission, Tim. Yes, you may use anything you would like, including video or still photos or anything said on NBC News. And so can anyone else who is a reporter or a representative of any news network or outlet. Jen is asking if I can tell us anything about Lisa's career as singer-songwriter. I think that's up on, is that up on your IMD, Lisa, or somewhere else?
Everyone can find me on the internet. I have a website.
Having said that, sorry. We will, I know she did a song called Guys Like This, but
Guys Like You.
We don't want to focus on her career, but we will, if you send me an email later, we can see if we can send you something. All right. Salma is asking how Lisa felt about reading the Esquire article that featured Noth's role in the movie White Girl. And did she watch the movie? We're not going to be answering that at this time, but thank you for the question. Jessica's asking how many conversations did Lisa have with Noth before the incident? We don't have a count, but we do know that because she originally met him in the restaurant, that was a place that both of them went. Her parents also went to that restaurant, had dinner in the restaurant. She did have prior conversations with Mr. Noth prior to the alleged incident in question. Jessica Napoli is also asking if Lisa suffered any PTSD after the incident. I'm not a psychologist, so I do not wish to opine at this moment as to whether she suffered PTSD, but I will say this, that it certainly had an emotional impact on her and her life. And she remembers very clearly what happened, is what she has indicated. So I think that we have covered most of the other questions already. I'll give you one last chance if there's anyone else that wants to ask a question that has not already been asked. But we're going to thank Lisa for being so brave and for sharing what she alleged was a very painful experience to her. And we're looking forward to the response from both the stars of Sex and the City, whom we really hope will help us, and so many others who have worked hard previously to get the ASA passed into law. And we're hoping that also that these stars will help us to urge Governor Hochul to make this an important part of her policy agenda when she delivers her state of the state for New York in less than 2 weeks. So thank you very much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.